Hi everyone, I'm back to do another unboxing with another one of the games I got a while ago to see what it's like. This is one I hadn't heard of before when I picked it up a few months ago at a toy and hobby expo that was here in Sydney. Earth Reborn by ZMan Games. I'm not sure how much the size comes out in terms of the video, how big it actually is, but it's a huge thudding box when you drop it down. I weighed it a few minutes ago. It's about 4 to 5 kilos, somewhere around there, so it's definitely not a light game you can just pick up quickly and run home with, essentially. It was one of those ones, a few of my friends and I were looking at it, and it just kind of fits the board game stereotype of Earth in the future. I think this is 2065 according to the back. Earth is in danger, there's rival factions clashing up against one another. The standard sci-fi fare that tends to come up in board games anyway, but it just looked pretty interesting, had some interesting art. ZMan Games, they've done some great games in the past, and Board Game Geek seem to rate it pretty highly. Just to show what's in the box, or what's on the back of the box essentially. Just shows that there's a board, some dice, 12 minis that need to be painted from what I understand in there. A bit of scenery in there. It does go into detail on the background of the story and things like that. Post-apocalyptic universe, people are killing each other, the general stuff. There were a few things when I was looking at this originally that seemed a bit, not really bad, but odd for a game, even on this size, was that there were 9 scenario had a tutorial system involving 9 scenarios. I'm not sure exactly how in-depth those scenarios go in terms of are they quick 5-minute tutorials to get you into the game, but it did seem a bit of a strange thing at first that to learn to play a game, which does say on there it generates its own scenarios before you play, so it does have a bit of random elements to it to give it a bit of variance. 9 scenario tutorials seems like a bit of overkill to me, but I figured it was on special. It looks like it's got a few interesting minis in it that worst case scenario I can paint up and see what I do with those. Plus it's got a few interesting element bits. It does look like it's a bit of a DM run game. There's a screen up the back here. But all in all, I figured I'd pop this open and have a look at it with everyone on video. One thing that I'm not sure if it comes across too well in this video, but on the side of the box, it's actually got the time ratings and things here. Game runs from 45 minutes to 4 hours between 2 and 4 players, and 13 and over age group. Age group means nothing most days now, most times nowadays anyway. 45 minutes to 4 hours again did seem like a bit of a let's face it, part of the reason I got this box was the curiosity as to what I was getting myself into. 45 minutes is a reasonable time for a board game. 4 hours is an entire afternoon dedicated to it, and everyone will start asking when the food arrives. That could be related to the scenarios as well, depending on what's generated and things like that. But there was a lot of curiosity went into this purchase. The other thing I was curious about, which you can probably see on the video there, it's held together with the shrink wrap. You've got a good thumb width space between the top of the box lid and the bottom of the base of the box. So a few friends and I were kind of debating. One of the reasons I did want to open this on video was, is it pressurized to the point I'll do myself an injury when it springs up and hits me in the face? So I'll open this up and we'll see what I've got in here. Admittedly, I did look it up a little bit online first to see what it was going to be like. I didn't get a chance to read too much into it, but it seemed to be rated not highly, but quite decently online. So that's the shrink wrap off, not overly pressurized. That's actually a really nice finish on the box there. I tend to pay attention to box art and things like that for some reason nowadays. Okay. Yeah, there's a good inch of stuff on top of there, which I think I just saw the reason for the depth in there. So in there you've got a rule book, looks like it's pretty in-depth to a certain degree, but goes through all the miniatures, tokens, things like that. Looks like you've got some scenarios in there and just different ways. It does look very similar to Sedition Wars that McVeigh Miniatures did, well, last year, came into this year with the Kickstarter. But again, this is one of those things, if I'm not too keen on the game, the models, when I looked at them, I initially thought it was so like Sedition Wars that maybe I could use them for a few unique troopers and things like that in there, just to get a bit of variance into it. Not that Sedition Wars really needs that, or better minis, because it's McVeigh. Background and scenarios, so that's all the fluff of the story. Clearly there was something bad going on during that time, but just runs you through, well, Earth 2010 to 2020 is the beginning of the end. So according to this, we've got about 7 years left before we get into the desperate grasp for oil, or the last desperate grasp for oil. It does have some rather nice artwork in this, going through, having a look at what they've got available, little mecha thing there. And yes, obviously the background here and the different scenarios you can play out. It does look like an interesting game in terms of the artwork and things like that. It's definitely not a boring, here is Grey Room 1, here is Blue Room 3, things like that. And you've got some victory points and things like that from the looks of it to round out how the game's decided. Counters, sheets and sheets of counters from that. That's, if I put one of these out, that's actually a rather nice counter there. That's on thick stock and seems like, yeah, it's pretty tough and resistant. That's really nice artwork on the counters. I've seen a few ZMan game things before, and they do nice artwork and tokens and things like that. That is, yep, another one popping out there. So not too hard to get out of there with their die cut system. But yes, just some interesting counters there. Seem like decent quality. These look like some more counters and board pieces. So again, similar to Sedition Wars, it looks like you can actually create the board as you go. You're not stuck with things like Hero Quest and things like that that were initially a board that you just flattened out and decided you were going to play in rooms 12 through 18 or anything like that. You've got your different zones, things like that. Again, made out of the same card as the tokens, so it's pretty sturdy stuff. You can see there though the weight of it is actually dragging out these sheets though, so later on after this video I'm going to have to pop that all together, or pop that all out and just file it away in here. Some more board sections with tokens there. Looks like it's got a few little division lines for the squares, where to move things, stuff like that. And on this side you've got some little characters, Nick Bolter, Cherokee Bill, Frank Einstein, that's, yes, okay. So they've gone for a few trophy names in those ones. They look like a few reference cards and things like that. That's always good to have in a game, especially when you know you're going to be running through scenarios and background and things like that. That actually does look like the GM marker on the that was on the box that goes into all the different details and things like that. That's actually popped out and folded out rather nicely for a little GM screen. So that's a decent quality one. That's got a fair amount of thickness to it, so that you can, I'm trying to lightly bend it now and it's not really bending, but the pre-cut in there, well, the pre-cuts do let it stand up quite nicely. Again, more board pieces, another reference board. So I'm guessing these reference boards do come into a bit of a GM screen situation. You might want to keep your tactics or points or something like that hidden from the other people you're playing against. It doesn't seem to be a co-op game, but if you're going to include reference cards that turn into little screens, I'm guessing there's an element of secrecy and bluffing or something like that in there. Again, a lot more tokens, counters, tokens, boards. The list goes on and on. This essentially looks like the entire thickness of the sheet, or the extra inch to this box, was just keeping it on top of this storage tray. I appreciate that they have a storage tray like this, in all honesty. That actually does make it a bit easier, and I can fully understand why they added an extra inch to the box to store it this way. That saved them on popping elements out. And let's face it, people do like popping elements out of these boards to have a go at them, things like that, when they first open them up. A couple of nice dice bags there, not perfect quality, but if you're going to keep them in a box anyway, that makes perfect sense. Some custom dice there, so it's like, let's see if I can bring them up there a bit closer. Spies, shots, things like that. So they look decent quality. Some order cards showing the artwork for the characters and things like that. I'll crack those open in a minute. And we've got a tray of minis as well. I like that. To keep the minis safe and not move them around there, they come on a plastic tray, similar to what Zombicide and things like that had in there when I saw them opened up. There's a few there that have shaken out, but admittedly that could have been me earlier on this evening, where I was marching around the house and waving the box around to weigh it and move it around, shift it out of the way, things like that. So I've probably shaken those all out of position tonight, and they don't look as nicely presented as they would. And a bunch of Ziploc bags. Again, they look like decent quality, and I mentioned it with Puppet Wars, I think, a few weeks ago. I do like Ziploc bags that come with games like this, just so that you can keep an eye on tokens, counters, things like that. Most people have them anyway, but providing a few that are small enough that the game company already knows how much people are going to need for something like this. So throwing in a few of those probably won't cost them anything, but it does make it a lot neater. So I'll pop open the minis for this one first. So again, they're actually quite nice. It's got a bit of a flex to the models there, but for a board game, that's not terrible. They've got their own coloured bases on there, showing that it looks like fire arcs and their unit names, things like that, so that you can identify them a bit easier. Having said that, the giant robot thing probably stands out pretty well on the board, so there's probably no one scurrying around looking for the Mammoth Mark II, because they just look for the most mammoth looking piece on the board. Again, a few more of the minis there. They've all got their unique weapons, and like the buzzsaw, the ninja assassin guy, the big brutes, and then you've got, I believe, the pink guys are the more human resistance kind of characters in this. They're actually stuck in there quite well. So, yeah. These all have some pretty good details on them. They're a bit bendy. They're not as bendy as, say, Bones. When that came out when I got that a few weeks ago, they were rather bendy. That was known about though, so that wasn't a huge deal. They've got a few mold lines on them from the looks of things. They're not perfectly cast, but I don't think anyone was expecting award-winning painters miniatures in this game either. But for the details and things like that, they come out of the box ready to go, so I have no real complaints there. To paint them, you probably need to mask the base off a bit so you don't get undercoat on it and things like that. But they look like they're unique enough from a distance that once you start playing the game, you've got two separate colours for the two different factions here from the looks of it. And they seem to be in different enough poses so that you could tell them apart pretty easily. Just get these cards open. I've struggled with card packs like these lately, where everything gets trapped in there because I can't find a little ribbon bit to take it off. So they look like all your stat cards there, similar playing card size, so you could sleeve those up quite nicely. And it's got artwork of the different characters on there. So the Mammoth there, for instance, John Kendall, Frank Einstein. So we've got a few different things there, and your items, infrared goggles, U-43 SMG, things like that, taser, flamer, and look, it's got little descriptions down there of what they do. That's clearly going to be an explosive, and it bursts out in a little cross pattern, things like that. So you've got a few other items there, one called Rap and Rhyme as well. I'm guessing that's an ad. Oh, and also Dungeon Twister. So we found the advertising section of their card deck. So yeah, that's pretty good artwork. You can tell those pretty decent. Apart from all the other pieces in there, you can tell those. Part on the back there, the mission cards. So clearly the two different faction missions. One seems to have more than the other. Oh no, there's the other red missions. And you've got some weapons, and you've got zombies, jacksaw, things like that. So just looking for, based on the artwork you're getting there for that one of Jacksaw, that is Jacksaw there, and from the artwork, he's pretty spot on. You'd have a hard time looking at the art, I think, and not being able to figure out who's who in these factions. So that seems pretty good. It'll be interesting to have a run through and play this at some point in the future. I'm not sure when, because I've got things like Moab coming up in a few weeks, stuff like that. But it's definitely something I'll look into at one point and just run through the game a few times, try out the scenarios, and just out of curiosity see what it plays like. Probably something that I'd want to do over the course of a day with a few friends and compare this to Sedition Wars, something like that, and just do a few shots of them next to other Sedition Wars miniatures and things like that, just to see how they stack up. Overall impression of the game straight out of the box, it's got some decent components in there. It looks like an interesting setting, very nice artwork, and just presented pretty well. So yes, that's the unboxing for Earth Reborn. I hope you like it.